What's up, guys? I'm LQ. This is the LQ Review. Thank you so much for joining me here at my YouTube channel. This is where I talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff that we love to talk about: movies, video games, comic books, and TV shows. And I'm going to do a little retrospective today. So, I recently went back and rewatched season 1 of Little House on the Prairie. So, when I was a kid, my family and we had two shows that we watched every night when they were on TV: Star Trek The Next Generation and Little House on the Prairie. Now, this was obviously before streaming. When I was a kid, you watched what was on TV, or you didn't watch anything. so, so Star Trek Next Generation, Little House on the Prairie, my family and we watched it. It was family programming. And it was one of those things where I'm a Trekkie today because of that. I'm a huge Star Trek fan today because of that. Little House on the Prairie is a little different. Little House on the Prairie it's a property that did not continue in television or movies post the series. So it just stopped. So my fandom stopped with it. Right? I have not seen a single episode until I rewatched season 1. I had not seen a single episode of Little House on the Prairie since I was probably 12, maybe. Maybe I watched it that late, probably more like 11 or 10. It'd been that long. So we're talking 30 years or so since I had seen an episode. Something that was, like I said, family programming, something that we watched together. The whole family sat down in the living room and watched it together. And so my wife and we were talking about it the other day, and I was like, I tried to hum the theme song, and I couldn't come up with it. So I was like, all right, I know that this is on Peacock. So I went to Peacock, and I started watching the first episode. And then I didn't stop. I watched the whole season. Took me about a week, but I watched the whole season. This is engrossing television. Believe it or not, guys, Little House on the Prairie was engrossing television, especially, maybe not if you're just a casual viewer of TV, but if you are somebody who's interested, number one, in the history of television, and number two, if you're a history buff like me. I teach history, so if you're a history buff like me, this is I would almost call Little House on the Prairie essential viewing. So I watched it, and I couldn't help but marvel at a couple things. First, let's just talk about it. Michael Landon. Phenomenal. Just his charisma, his screen presence, his acting ability. He had this earnestness to him where you could just tell, I think he's a good dude. Like, I think this guy's a good guy. I know that guy is a good guy. This certain tough, gruff, like he's a man's man, but at the same time, he's a good dude. And you know that he loves his kids. You know he loves his wife. That's the type of person that he is. He exuded Christian values. And he was just a wonderful actor. He died when I was young. Michael Landon died when I was young. I never watched Highway to Heaven. Little House on the Prairie was the only thing I knew him from. But so when he died when I was young, his death didn't really have a big impact on me because I was young. He was the life. He was the breath of this show. All right, it was told from the point of view of Laura Ingalls Wilder, of Laura Ingalls at the time. She was the narrator. She was, everything was told from her perspective, but he was the heart. He was the breath of the show. And behind every great man is a greater woman, and Karen Grassel playing his wife, another just phenomenal choice. Her acting, her loving nature, her strength, her fortitude during this time where everything is uncertain. This time where they're trying to, I mean, when I watched that first episode where they settled, they built the house, and then they had to leave because the government had a new treaty with the Native Americans and they had to leave again. Wow. I mean, that had no meaning to me when I was a kid. Now watching it, I'm like, they uprooted everything and they had to leave. Wow. And so she just showed this fortitude, this strength, this grace, and I loved it. Melissa Gilbert as Laura Ingalls Wilder, she was fine. She was fine, and I think she made a career as an actress. And keep in mind, I only watched the first season here, so the first season is the only one that I'm up to date on. I've seen them all, but the first season is the only one that I'm real up to date on. So yeah, Melissa Gilbert did a fine job. I thought that the one that I really liked, where is it? Kevin, no. Where is it? The one that I really liked was Mr. Edwards. I'm trying to see who played Mr. Edwards. I had it here a second ago. There it is. Victor French is Mr. Edwards. Victor Edwin French. I loved his character. Now, he was only in the first 3 seasons as a regular, and then he popped up here and there throughout the rest of the series. I loved his character. I thought he brought humor to the show. I thought that he brought a certain amount of wit to the show, a certain amount of gruffness. I really liked his character a lot. Victor French is Mr. Edwards. All right, let's talk about what the show was. All right, Little House on the Prairie is a show that I don't know would get made today because it had such deep Christian undertones in it. I would almost go as far as saying this was a Christian show. The lessons that were portrayed in the show, the morality of the show, the all the character. I mean, this was in a lot of ways, even a lot of the topics that were addressed in the show were addressed from the Christian point of view. This was in a lot of ways a Christian show. So I don't know that this is something that would get made today, because today it's all about reaching the most massive audience possible. All right, that's what it's about. It's not about necessarily telling an authentic story. It's about reaching the most massive audience that you possibly can. And anytime that you tell a story that's centered around a specific religion, you limit your audience. I think that's why The Stand. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I watched the new The Stand, the new Stephen King's The Stand on CBS All Access, and it was awful. It was awful. One of the worst adaptations I've ever seen. But I think part of that is because they chickened out. They chickened out. They didn't want to make it a overt Christian show, so they chickened out. And I think that was part of the problems of that. And today, when Little House on the Prairie was made back in the 70s, I think it was the 70s, right? Yeah, it was the 70s. Back when Little House on the Prairie was made in the 70s, it reached a wide audience because that, the United States at the time had a more overt Christian population than we do today. Now, something like 73% of Americans say that they believe in God. Right? It's still the vast majority of Americans say they believe in God, and it's a minority that doesn't. But we also have a diverse series of religions in the United States today. Christianity is still the main religion, but you've got Jews here, you've got Muslims here, you've got Scientologists, you've got Latter-day Saints, the LDS. You've got such a wide salad bowl of religions here in this country that having a show that's meant for a wide audience that has one religion as its focal point, I don't think we're going to see that anymore. I don't think we're going to see that anymore. So Little House on the Prairie was definitely a product of its time. It was a product of its time from the religious standpoint, and it was also a product of its time in a lot of ways from the masculinity standpoint, right? Michael Landon's character Charles Ingalls is portrayed as the head of the house. He's portrayed as the head of the house, as the, he has the final say. Now his wife, who is a strong woman, she will give her opinion. But if the husband has a dissenting opinion, the family's going to do what the husband says. And that was definitely a product of its time. That's not something that you're going to see in today's television. But all that to say, I loved watching this season. Now, I don't know that I'm going to jump right into season 2 right away. I got a lot of TV that I want to watch. I got a lot of shows I want to watch. I'm getting a lot of movies I want to watch. I'm getting my master's degree. I've got a job. I got kids. I don't know that I'm going to dive right into season 2. But this was an enjoyable experience. My favorite episode is the one where Charles went looking for work, and he ended up in a rock quarry. And they were busting up rocks, and one of the workmen there died, and it was just a well shot episode, well acted episode. Everything about that episode was just like, wow, we're lucky we live in 2021. Coronavirus, that's fine. That's fine. I don't have to bust up rock every day with a sledgehammer. So. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about it. Little House on the Prairie was a very, very good show for the time, and I think it's unfortunate that it still does not have a wide audience anymore. I believe that most people that are younger than me, if you go up to them and you say, "Hey, have you seen any Little House on the Prairie episodes?" They're gonna say, "What's Little House on the Prairie?" And that's unfortunate, because this really was a show that was a product of its time, that stands on its own in the history of American television, and I think it deserves that distinction, that it is an important piece in the history of American television. So hopefully my video gets a couple people to discover it or revisit it, because it's definitely worth watching. And that is my retrospective, my thoughts, my revisit of Little House on the Prairie. Guys, how many of you actually watched Little House on the Prairie? Have seen any of it? Are any of you my age maybe? Maybe you had family night in front of the TV watching Little House on the Prairie. Maybe some of you are much younger than me and have no idea what I'm talking about. Let me know if you've seen any episodes of Little House on the Prairie in the comments down below. While you're down there, make sure you subscribe to my channel. And as always, thank you so much for joining me right here at the LQ Review, where we get to talk about all the geeky, nerdy stuff we love to talk about. Until next time, we'll see you guys later.